In the sweltering summer of 1916, a series of brutal shark attacks along the Jersey shore shatters the idyllic calm of beachside towns, igniting a frenzy of fear, speculation, and an unprecedented hunt for the predator lurking just offshore. In this almost certainly not companion series, we examine each episode's origins, production process, behind the scenes, personal thoughts, and most likely go off on some tangents in spite of our best efforts. In this episode, we examine We Saw the Water Turning Red, the 1916 Jersey Shore shark attacks. I'm Layla Lawrence.
And I'm Dan Lauer.
And this is Possibly Not. So Dan, Jaws is obviously a cultural phenomenon that nearly everybody, I would imagine, in the at least Western world has heard of. I didn't know that it was based on a book. And so that was something that I learned from you. How did you sort of dive into this, no pun intended, dive into this story? And what inspired your original article?
I think it's a fairly well-known story, unlike some of the other or the previous episodes. But I think that it was on my list because I remember when I was a kid seeing it might have been a History Channel documentary when the History Channel still did history-related things. And it was about this. And I remember I wanted to find it. I just wanted to watch it, and I couldn't find it anymore. But I do remember that it was narrated by Bill Curtis. So it had a certain, like, he does PBS Frontline, and it was a really good documentary, but it was probably made in the late 80s, early 90s, so the production quality was really low. And I couldn't find it, and I was like, well, hey, there's a gap in the market then. Nobody else will be able to find it either, so might as well do another one of these. Obviously, I have an obsession with Jaws. And the filmmaking process in general, and the way that this story connects to the book, which connects to the cultural phenomenon of Jaws, which is sort of it was almost a sea change in the way that people thought of the film theater experience. It's like the first blockbuster, even before Star Wars. And it sort of kicked off that, or it didn't kick off, but the sort of the new wave of film directors like Francis Ford Coppola and Brian De Palma, George Lucas, and obviously Steven Spielberg was sort of all in that era. And The Godfather came first, but Steven Spielberg was part of that class. They were all friends, and he was the first one to have this. Yeah, Jaws was a movie that people would go see 10 times.
Yeah, and it has persevered as well. I mean, it's something that is still very much in popular culture. It's something that is still, I would dare say, a phenomenon today. I don't know that anything has ever replaced it, really.
Well, I guess it depends on who you ask. Sadly, I think that maybe Marvel movies have replaced it for the younger generation, but I can mourn that in silence. Incidentally, I was going to say that Bill Curtis. So I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he does like PBS Frontline stuff, and I have a Mount Rushmore of voiceover talent, and it's Bill Curtis, Robert Stack from Unsolved Mysteries, you, and then probably Gary Busey.
I do like that I am above Gary Busey. I think that is the only time that I will ever be able to utter the sentence, glad I'm on top of Gary Busey.
I don't know. Life is long. But I also think I add Gary Busey there because sometimes you just need pure gibberish.
That's true.
Nobody does it better. But you're right there on my Mount Rushmore. But yeah, so basically that was... I'm fascinated by this story, and I think that the incidents of the shark attacks are obviously fascinating and tragic, but the way that if not for this incident and Peter Benchley, who wrote the novel Jaws, not reading, this was his inspiration for what if a shark found a predation territory in a small northern coastal New Englandish sort of town, got a taste for it and didn't go away. And his inspiration, and obviously the story in this bears virtually no resemblance to the film Jaws or the novel, but this was the seed of the idea. If not for this occurrence, there would be no Jaws book or movie, or it would be very different. So I don't think this is an interesting one, as we discussed off mic, which is that, from a philosophical perspective or from I love the film Jaws and I've read the book Jaws, and I'm fascinated by, I'm both a filmmaker and I guess not a novelist, but a memoirist. So I'm not only fascinated by the media itself, but the process. I'm kind of obsessed with filmmaking process, and I like to read about how other authors write. And there's if you buy the Jaws Blu-ray, there's a pretty great feature-length documentary about the making of Jaws that begins with the publication of the book. And as often happens, the book was sort of done, and the hardest thing, like I know a lot of bands run into this, like they make a perfectly serviceable album in a month that they're very, very happy with, and then they spend 6 months trying to come up with a decent title. And Peter Benchley is interviewed and talks about, like, they were right up against the publication date, and he and his editor were at dinner or something, and they had a lot of these pretentious titles like Horror from the Deep.
Oh.
And the Leviathan of Doom, and and then there was, but he said that there were also this whole like subcategory of the Jaws of Fear and the Jaws of Death and the Jaws of, and they were like, well, the only word that we can even agree on is Jaws, so let's just call the fucking thing Jaws and be done with it. But I think that what I like about that is that it's such an innocuous decision, which is almost based on frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know what to call the fucking book, so let's just call it Jaws, see how it goes. But it kind of trickles down because now Jaws means something, even to people who have never seen the movie. It's just in the collective consciousness, and cultural consciousness. But then Steven Spielberg was incredible. Believe it or not, Steven Spielberg was 27 when he directed Jaws. And he had done some TV stuff, and he had done, I think, one movie in theaters called The Sugarland Express, and then one TV movie called Duel. And he was sort of an up-and-comer, and they spent a lot of time trying to get older, more seasoned directors interested in this, and everybody was like, that's impossible. So I think basically the studio was like, well, we want to make this movie. We need somebody stupid and hungry.
Well, joke's on them, hey?
Yeah, but they got Steven Spielberg, and he tells a story about being presented with the script, and because Jaws hadn't been made yet and he hadn't read the book, it didn't mean anything to him, and he was like, "Is this about a dentist?"
I was going to say, like, the word Jaws is, I mean, while it does relate to the subject matter, it also kind of doesn't.
It doesn't, because I think that you could see where the seed of the idea was, that it would have, like, they were struggling, like the Jaws of Death or the Jaws of Horror, or the Jaws of the Deep.
Just pick the common denominator.
And they just went with Jaws. But like for him, and probably for most people, because I think that let me correct that. It wasn't a script. Peter Benchley published the book and sold the film rights at the same time.
Oh,
so there was a galley print of the book, because I think it's 20th Century Fox. No, it's Universal. Excuse me.
Universal, yeah.
So when they option a book before it's published, they get a galley so they can start shopping it around. And so I think what he actually saw.
Can you explain to people what a galley is?
Yeah, a galley version of a book is non-bound. It's the book in its true form, but without being bound and without being like fully presented. So it would be basically a galley version of a book is like a review copy.
So kind of like a draft. It would just be like papers kind of stapled together sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a galley typically is the finished book as it will be published, but it can
Okay.
be sent out in a form pre-publication so people can read the book before it's actually released if they want to do a screenplay, a screen adaptation,
Hmm.
or try to option it,
But
or they
that
do
galley
option it.
version was already called Jaws.
Yeah, so well, and I think that was I wanted to amend myself because it wasn't a script that he saw.
Mm-hmm.
He saw on somebody's desk a copy of the galley version of Jaws because Jaws became a very successful book. He saw the galley version before the book was released, and he was like, "What the fuck does that mean? Is it about a dentist?"
Just seeing it on someone's desk. Yeah, I mean, I can
Yeah,
imagine.
because Jaws didn't mean anything anymore, and I think now it's so pervasive that I think people actually think of the shark like that's
Yeah.
its name,
Well, and
Jaws.
you don't even just think of the shock, you think of the score as well. You can probably imagine like scenes in your mind. You can probably imagine lines from the movie. Like I think it all just kind of goes together.
Well, and I think that you know better than anybody that I'm basically a walking Wikipedia of film trivia.
Yes.
I'm just obsessed. I get obsessive about it. I'm obsessed by it.
You? No.
But to
Obsessive?
your
What?
to your point, so obviously John Williams did the score for Jaws, and there's a pretty classic story about Steven Spielberg got the job, and he was. I mean, we could talk a little bit about this. The filming Jaws was an absolute nightmare. You never
Mm-hmm.
want to film in the ocean.
Famously a nightmare.
Yeah, you never want to film in the ocean. The shark that they built several different kinds of sharks, but the hero shark, which is a term for a prop in a movie that's the one that's going to be seen
Mm-hmm.
fully.
Yeah.
That's the one that you make look the best, and then you have you have versions of it that are going to be only be seen from one side or only be seen far away.
Yeah. And those are
They,
not going to be as detailed. They're not going to be
yeah.
as complete.
So the quote unquote the industry or the term of art for the one that's you put the most work into that you're going to see most closely is called the hero prop.
Mm-hmm.
So the hero shark was nicknamed Bruce, and but it was also not so affectionately called the Great White Turd. On the set, I think they were supposed to shoot for 3 months. I think they were there for 11 because the shark didn't work. It
Well,
was
I mean,
in
the salt water is just corrosive, and you've got obviously mechanical parts and electronic parts, and just the material that the shark is covered with. And yeah, I can imagine an absolute nightmare.
Essentially, they had it on a platform that they would sink to the bottom of the sound, and it was on this gimbal arm so it could rise out of the water, but it was all hydraulic driven. And as soon as they deployed it, the Atlantic would begin to destroy it. Um,
Wow.
so I don't want to lose this. So I'm like jumping forward in time a little bit because you mentioned the score.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I mean,
they
well, it's one of the only ones where, I mean, it's one of the iconic scores. You can literally just hear the two notes, maybe even just one note, and you know exactly what it is.
and for anybody who doesn't know, it'll be fair use, so I could drop a clip in right now. Now you know what I'm talking about. But so Steven Spielberg very badly wanted John Williams to score Jaws. He was excited to work with him, and so he showed him a assembly cut, which is like, well, again, there's a lot of term of art here, but an assembly cut of a film is even before the director's cut and even before the effects are finished.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the scenes cut in their most basic order.
Yeah, it's just like a rough copy, basically, a rough draft.
Really just like that's why they call it an assembly, because you take all of the good footage you have and all the scenes that you know you need for your movie and you put them together. There's no music, there's no sound effects, there's no final score, obviously, but that's typically what the composer will begin to develop ideas from.
It is so awkward to watch.
Yeah.
If anyone ever gets a chance to watch something like that, it is so bizarre to watch because music changes things just exponentially.
You need a really good imagination to see what the potential in that state. But so John Williams did that, and then Steven Spielberg on this documentary that I'm referring to tells a wonderful story about going into a not even a recording session, just like a demo session where John Williams had prepared. He had written melodies that he didn't have an orchestra or anything. He was going to demo them for Spielberg on the piano because he's also a pianist. So he said, I have the main, he is a tiny pianist. Incidentally, have you ever heard the one about the guy who walks into a bar?
No, stop. No.
He takes out he puts on the bar a 12-inch piano and a tiny piano. No, I shouldn't tell that here.
I hate this.
Anyway. But he says that John Williams said to Spielberg, I have the main theme for Jaws, which is typically what they, I don't know if every composer starts this way, but you start there because then the rest of the music becomes variations on that theme. So maybe that's the hardest, I'm not that musically inclined. But he said, I've got the main theme. And Steven Spielberg was like, amazing. And he said he thought it would be something sort of vaguely mystical, maybe almost outer space, but inner space for the water. He didn't know exactly what he was going to hear, and then he said with two fingers on the low keys of the piano, John Williams did dun 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 dun, and Steven Spielberg started laughing, and he said, "That's a good one." Really though, what's the theme? And John Williams was like, "No, that's it. That's the theme for the shark."
Wow.
And he was like, play it again. And it was so simplistic that it was sort of beyond him to grasp at first. And I love that story because even Spielberg couldn't see how powerful that was, because John Williams is also interviewed and talks about how his inspiration for that was the mindlessness of it. There's no thought. A shark, and they even, like Hooper says in the movie, all a shark does is swim and eat and make baby sharks, and that's it. That's their whole life.
Yeah.
There's no thought process behind it. It's all instinct, and so that sort of mindless droning, but it's just so effective, and it gives you this sense of dread, even if you've never seen the movie.
Yeah,
it can put some dread in you.
I think it also kind of speaks to the prehistoric sort of base nature of even just the fear of sharks as well, the fear of the unknown, because that really is where the fear of sharks comes from, is that we don't fully understand them. You get into dark water and there could be anything lurking around. So I think that kind of speaks to that as well. It works so perfectly.
It does, because even if you're a marine biologist and you understand sharks better than anyone, if you're in the water deep, whether you understand them or not, they might be down there because you can't see. It's sort of like our fear of the dark, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that it works incredibly. And then I'll just, I'll touch just briefly on the production experience. They shot on Martha's Vineyard, which is a small New England sort of, well, you see it in the movie. That is Martha's Vineyard. The people in Martha's Vineyard didn't want them there for 3 months. They sure as shit didn't want them there for a year. So the locals were getting restless. The shark didn't work. And think about, you've been on film sets. Now imagine, how difficult it is to coordinate 50 people to pull off a moving shot.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that a film gets made at all is a small miracle, to be honest. Any film.
So if you're doing a professional film, you need focus pullers, you need camera operators, you need the first assistant director, the director. And if you're doing just a shot where two people walk from one location to another location inside of the same house, if anything, and let's say that lasts for 90 seconds, if a single thing goes wrong with anybody who's doing their job, you have to start over.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a scene like that, I've shot scenes before inside of, apartments or houses or something. It could take an entire day to shoot a 3-minute scene, because you're doing different camera angles and the lighting changes and sometimes the lighting is off. And when you're shooting outside, lighting is a nightmare.
Now take that and transpose that to the ocean, where there's three boats. One of them is the Orca, which is the boat. It's the hero boat. It's the boat that Brody Hooper and Quint are on, chasing down
Mm-hmm.
the shark. So that's the boat they're shooting. And because they can't all be moving around, that's tethered it's anchored to the bottom. And now there's a camera boat, or maybe even two camera boats that are shooting from different angles to try to get this stuff. And then there's the administrative boat where Spielberg probably is and the producers coordinating. So they have to talk through walkie-talkies.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all tethered to the ocean bottom. But that doesn't stop the tide. So as soon as you would get a shot set, the waves or the tide might change. And now all the boats swing around each other.
Yeah, and of course you can't get the boats that are not the hero boat. You can't get those in the shot either.
No. And they tell, Richard Dreyfuss tells a story because Steven Spielberg was very determined that he wanted to be able to make the characters feel as isolated as possible. And what's good about that area outside of Martha's Vineyard is it's a very shallow, sandy bottom. So he could go 10 miles out, and the bottom of the sea bottom was only 50 feet, even that far.
Oh, okay.
And that was necessary for them to be able to implement the shark and to be able to tether and do the underwater filming, which they did on location. So he wanted to never let the audience see the shoreline, because he thought as soon as they did, when things were getting at their worst, he would say, well, the shore is right there.
They could just
the
swim to shore.
Or just push, floor it to shore, and you're out of this mess. So he wanted to have, no matter where he pointed his camera, he wanted the horizon to be ocean. But the problem with that is that you're shooting the horizon, right? And so they would get a shot set up. They're fighting the tides. The shark may or may not be working. The actors may be so violently seasick that they're vomiting between every take.
Especially being out there probably for 12-hour days, I'm sure.
Or maybe even, as long as there's sunlight, right? You're filming. Because you can't light the ocean, so you're dependent on the sun, the clouds. Everything has to go perfectly. Everyone would be in position. Everyone would be capable of doing the take. The shark would be working. The boats would be in position. And then he was just about to call action so many times. And then on the right of the frame, the tiniest little sail of a sailboat would appear. And that's that's the vanishing point of the horizon for your wide shot. So now you have to spend an hour waiting for this tiny little sail to go from the right side of the screen all the way to the left and disappear.
Well, and that's something that in today's movie making, you could very easily just erase that with, computers. And so it is, in some ways, movie making now is easier. In some ways, it's more difficult. I think it's more complicated. But for things like that, it's definitely easier. It's that famous, we'll just fix it in post kind of thing.
And I think that in that, because I think that they shot in 73, 74, it was released in 75. And there's something about the effort put into capturing it as it was happening that you can feel.
Yeah.
You might not know exactly why you feel that it feels more real. But you might not know, you wouldn't know. You don't need to know the story I just told you for it to feel very real to you. The reason it feels real is because they didn't fix shit in post. They had to wait until the sailboat was gone, and what you're seeing is what was captured at the time.
Yeah. I will say before we go any further with this, I have never seen Jaws.
It's almost enough to make me fire you from this show.
I know that is criminal, but I also just had a thought. That potentially
is that a new experience for you?
It is a new with my tiny woman brain.
That was too mean.
I did just have a thought. We could potentially maybe do a live watch. I could watch it for the first time.
Oh, like a little commentary?
Yeah. Something like
That'd
that.
be great. I would love to
I
do
don't
a
know how we
commentary
would
track.
do that or why we would do that, or maybe coincide it with the release of the episode or make it a Patreon thing or something like that. But I would be willing to watch it for the first time and you can see like my first reactions to it.
No, that would be fun. I mean, obviously we can't post. We could post. Anyone can post a commentary to a movie. We could just do the audio, and then we could even say like, "And we're pushing play now."
Yeah,
and then people could watch along.
I mean, I think that would be kind of fun because genuinely have never seen it. I never wanted to watch it because I'm like a water baby. I love the ocean. I love being in the water. I love being at the beach. And I always thought that if I watched it, it would give me like an irrational fear. So I've kind of spent my life learning as much about sharks as I can so that I'm not as frightened by them. They don't seem like such a big deal to me. Obviously something to be respected, but they don't seem like something I should necessarily like fear. So I always thought kind of if I watched it, it would prey on that like tiny kernel of like instinctual fear that I have of sharks, and I would never want to get back in the water again.
It does, and it did for me. I did and do despise the beach with my full being, so that's not a problem. But I will say that I was born in the '80s, and that was at a time when parents were not considerate at all of the media their children consumed. So I probably saw Jaws and other movies less appropriate when I was like 7 or 8.
Yeah,
and I mean, it gets in you so deep when it happens at that age. I was afraid to go in my pool, which I could see the bottom.
Yeah.
But there was a little part of me that's like, well, I mean,
you
there
don't
still
know.
could be a shark in there.
It could come from that drain. You never know. Well, in kids' imaginations as well. You just runs away with you. The movie that did that for me was The Exorcist. I saw it when I was, I think, like 11 at a sleepover, which is just far too young to be watching something like that. And that's the movie that's kind of stuck with me to this day. But yeah, never seen Jaws. So this is all news to me.
That's criminal. It really is criminal.
And I worked at Universal, so we had the ride, we had the shark, Universal Studios in Orlando. We had the shark. The shark is still there, hanging up. Bruce is still there.
But the Jaws experience ride is not, and
the Jaws experience ride is not. No, it was replaced by Harry Potter. Yeah, it was replaced by Hogsmeade.
I have never forgiven them, and I never will, and I will never go back.
Or not Hogsmeade. Sorry, I apologize. It was replaced by Diagon Alley. That's what it is. Not Hogsmeade. Well, I have to be accurate, at least. I feel like people would come for me if they're like, "That's not Hogsmeade. That's Diagon." People are diehard about that kind of thing.
I don't even know what Hogsmeade is, and I don't care because it's not Jaws.
I will say, there was a pervasive sadness when Jaws went, and I think it still exists to this day. I think of all of the attractions that have closed at that theme park, and kind of they've cycled through and all that. And I mean, Universal is a fairly popular park. All of the attractions that have closed and they've cycled through, and, new ones have come in. And I think Jaws is the one that there will always, I feel like, be some sort of regret that closed. That will always be the one that people are just like, man, I wish that didn't close.
Well, and incidentally, I still am full of fury about this, and the ride wasn't good, so it's mostly nostalgia. But it was, I mean, it was as cheesy as you're imagining. I mean, basically, you got on a boat, and it was Amity, and there was a tour guide who was always way too excited.
Well, the skipper, the tour guide, I think, is who made it. Like, if you got, as with so many things, like if you got a good skipper who was making jokes and whatever. And I mean, of course, your sense of humor is far elevated to many other people's. But
I know.
For normal people who fart jokes and whatever, like the skippers, if you got a good skipper, it was a great experience. I remember I went on the ride. I think I was with my dad, and it was the first time I had ever been on the ride. I made the mistake of sitting on the end, like, of the boat. I was like right on the side, and I didn't know that the shark was whatever it was, I can't remember, but I looked over the side of the boat, like kind of leaned over the side of the boat, because I was like, what the hell is happening? And the shark came out, and I'm not joking, I think that was the closest I've ever been to wetting myself out of fear.
Well, I will just say that like as an adult and after it loses its impact after the first, like you're not surprised anymore, and it has a certain amount of tackiness and cheese to it, but that's what made it charming.
Yeah,
But
it's the
essentially
nostalgia. Yeah.
it is. It's almost like it's an extension of the movie. It's Jaws 2, and they're just doing the concept or the premise is that you're just doing a little skippered tour of Amity Island, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a report that another boat sunk, and there's some, they're like even
It's
in
still
their
not
sort of
safe to go back in the water, kind of
but
thing.
but
Yeah.
but even in their patter, they're like, oh, we did, yeah, we had a quote unquote shark problem like 10 years ago, but that's not a don't even worry about it sort of
Yeah.
thing. And then it evolves where there's a confrontation with it, like you try to dock, and inside the dock it gets all dark, and the shark pops up, but it's sort of half hidden in shadow, and
But it was
so
a
it's fun.
classic, like, practical theme park ride, which there aren't a lot
Yeah.
of practical theme park rides anymore. It's a lot of, like, screens and just chairs moving and that kind of thing. But as far as, like, a practical ride went, it was brilliant.
It was great. I really loved it. And so, but anyway, that's, and obviously that they're, getting back to because like, I think, and we addressed this, and I think that the tone of the episode is bearing this out. There's no mystery to this story, and there's nothing really that's, a question. In the other episodes that we released thus far, there's either a mystery component or a motivational component because we're dealing with humans. This is pretty cut and dry. A shark
Yeah.
found a food source and took advantage of it, and that's what
Well,
sharks do.
I would argue the only mystery is that the shark was in an environment that sharks normally are not in. I know that's kind of addressed as well, as far as, it was brackish water and they just kind of went for it. But you don't normally see sharks in that kind of environment.
No, it's very rare circumstances, and that story has never been told again. That's very rare, and we do get into a little bit about why that might be. This was at a time when swimming for recreation, the sort of resort lifestyle was relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
And then also you have the coincidence of in the Atlantic, World War I activity going on that might have disturbed sharks' natural feeding grounds.
I
and
found
pushed
that
them.
theory really interesting. The World War I theory,
Yeah.
I found really interesting.
Which is just a theory, but it goes some way to explaining why.
Yeah, just kind of like changing their migration patterns. I mean, I could certainly see that happening.
Yeah, but I think unlike the, I think what's most interesting about this and the reason I wanted, well, again, more than any, I think I know why I wanted to do this is really pretty simple. Is that I remember watching that. I'm almost certain it was a History Channel documentary produced sometime in the early '90s that I remember watching as a child, and it obviously um, talks about a lot of the same things, and it focuses more on we focus a little bit more on the why of how that the cultural impact of it, not only from the media perspective but also from kicking off more of a drive to understand sharks and therefore
Absolutely.
marine biology in general. We
Yeah.
focus on that a little bit more and don't spend too much time on the morbidity of telling the story about these poor kids and people who got ate. Incidentally, I know it's eaten, but I just feel fun. It feels fun to say ate.
I mean, it is true. It is horribly tragic. I mean, it's an awful way to go, and it's there's nothing that you can do. I think is the helpless feeling of it as well. Like these, because it could be that, okay, no, the shark is not eating you, it's not consuming your entire body, but the blood loss, the just absolute trauma to your body, that's what ends up killing people. So it is like a horrible thing to think about when you think about it. I mean, these poor kids and their families and the people who had to witness this, it's just, I mean, it is truly an atrocity.
Well, and incidentally, the way that sharks Like a lot of the time that people get attacked by sharks, they will be in wetsuits and from underneath. If it's daylight,
Mm-hmm.
from under the water, looking up. I mean, sharks prey, especially great whites, prey on seals a fair
Yeah.
amount, and it's kind of hard to tell the difference. But the thing a shark will do, it'll be an attack to stun and immobilize, but that's
Mm-hmm.
also the way that they bite to test.
Yes.
What is this? They don't have another way to figure out to distinguish it. So sometimes if somebody's leg is bitten off and they're not eaten completely, the reason is because the shark was realized this is like rubber or something. This isn't what I
Yeah, I mean, I
wanted, but
think that's something
unfortunately,
that's kind of been researched and explored is that, I mean, I don't know, I've never asked a shark and I doubt anyone else has, but the fact that sharks don't like the taste of humans. So it is that like testing bite and then they're like, oh no, I don't like this. I think they've said some species of sharks like just don't care. They'll eat whatever. It's like bull sharks, I think, and maybe tiger sharks. I'm not sure.
well, I would say that I mean it might have more to do about like if someone's wearing a rubber suit, but I mean meat and blood and fat is meat and blood and fat. I don't think that sharks have a I mean, they might have a preferred diet, but if they have an opportunity, I don't know why they wouldn't.
Well,
Just
I
like
think it's kind of based on the fact that very rarely in shark attacks is an entire person consumed, which
as
you would
far as
kind
we
of think
know.
if they liked the taste of a human, the entire person would be consumed. A lot of times it is just like a leg or an arm, or they take a chunk out of their side or something like that. Like,
Well,
and
I think
these
what's
people get
interesting about
away somehow as well sometimes.
but I think what's interesting about that is how many people quote unquote drowned and were never seen again.
That's true. That's very true.
So the ones that we know about are the ones that people, weren't consumed
Yeah.
completely. So I mean, I think that that's a pretty small
And of
test
course,
case.
we both live in, well, I lived and you currently live in Florida, which is like a huge shark attack area as well. New Smyrna Beach is famously like a shark breeding ground, I think, or something. I just know there's always loads of sharks at New Smyrna Beach.
I don't go to the beach because
I think we established that.
well, there's people there.
Yeah.
So that's
and
strike
sunlight
one. And it smells like piss.
and happiness and children.
Yeah, we just see it with different eyes. But I just I didn't want to let it go unsaid that however many minutes ago you said the sentence, I've never asked a shark.
I haven't. I don't think anyone else has either.
Well, I think, Scarlett, that do people know I call you Scarlett? Should that not be a thing?
I mean, I don't think it matters. I don't know.
Okay.
That's a fun thing for Patreons. We have nicknames for each other, Patreons. There you go. We very rarely call each other Dan and Layla. It's very weird, actually.
What's your nickname for me?
Woody.
Yeah, we call each other Woody and Scarlett.
Woody and Scarlett. It's been like that for years. I don't even know when it started. It's just been 4 years.
But what's interesting is that when I'm referring to you to other people, it's a struggle for me to say, because if it's somebody who's not who doesn't know you that well or our relationship that well, Layla might not mean much to them. But even my mother knows who Layla is, but she doesn't know who Scarlett is. And sometimes I say Scarlett anyway.
It's just out of habit, isn't it? I do the same thing with my husband, with Trevor. I'll be talking about you and I'll say Woody. I mean, he knows who you are by any name at this point. But yeah. Just there you go. That's a little interesting tidbit for you. There you go. Oh God. But yes, no, I have never personally asked a shark whether he or she or they, I mean, I don't know what they prefer, likes the taste of humans.
Well, I think there's no time like the present. So I think you should probably dedicate at least the next 6 months to trying to have that conversation with a great white.
I mean, being where I am, being in Belize, yeah, why not? I don't know. Did great whites ever show up in the Caribbean? Maybe, I guess.
I don't care. Well, they did in Jaws 4, The Revenge, which is a movie I don't want to talk about, but Michael Caine is in it.
I genuinely didn't even know there was more than one.
Wow. Because so there's Jaws, and then there's Jaws 2, which is basically just Jaws again, except there's teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And then because it was made during there's been so many times that movie studios thought that 3D was the next big thing, and then implemented it and quickly abandoned it because people hate it.
Yeah.
Because it makes everybody nauseous. But there was a glut. It must have been the early 80s It must have been the early 80s. But there's a movie, there's a sequel with Dennis Quaid in it called Jaws 3D.
Oh, no.
That actually takes place at SeaWorld.
Shut up.
Yeah. And then there is Jaws 4 The Revenge, which stars the wife, Ellen Brody. Chief Brody's wife is a star of that movie.
Wow.
Her son becomes the new sheriff of Amity, and he is attacked and killed by a shark one night, which actually is a pretty gruesome death. But here's the thing. So her other son, because they've got two sons in the original movie, so these sons are adults now.
Okay.
Her other son has become a marine biologist and is doing some study of conchs in the Caribbean.
Okay.
So he's like, let's get you out of Amity. Like, this is too much trauma for you.
So come down here to this other ocean.
Well, coming down here to the island, we're like, I mean, great. I think part of the thing is he's like, well, great whites they don't exist in warm water. That's not their habitat. So,
but do they?
Well, they do. They do, Scarlett, because the title of the movie is Jaws 4 The Revenge. That doesn't refer to Ellen Brody's revenge on the shark. I'm not kidding. The plot of that movie is that the shark chases her to the Caribbean to get revenge on the Brody family. It's not random.
That is brilliant.
It's targeting the Brody family. So this shark is out for revenge.
That is amazing.
And believe it or not, Michael Caine stars in that movie.
Oh, bless. Wow.
And he won but could not accept an Oscar for his portrayal of, I can't remember the character's name, but he was in the Woody Allen movie Hannah and Her Sisters, which he won an Academy Award, and he could not accept because he was filming Jaws 4 The Revenge. And his only comment that I've ever seen about Jaws 4 The Revenge is, I've never seen it. I've heard it's terrible, but I have seen the house it built.
That's the thing. Sometimes as actors, you do things for a paycheck.
Yeah. And he said, I also
they
paid to put me up at the Ritz-Carlton in Bahama or whatever. And
got a vacation out of it, a working vacation. Days you weren't on set, you were just lounging around. Yeah, absolutely.
And he's like, I acted my ass off. I did the part. I took it seriously. I've never seen the movie. I've heard it's terrible, but I've seen the house it built. And that's really
there
all
you
I
go.
care about. But yes, so there are 3 sequels, all of them worse than the last.
Do you have any other shark movies that come to mind that you have either watched and or enjoyed?
Certainly not on the level of Jaws. There's a movie called Open Water about two people who are on a scuba diving trip, and they're underwater, and the captain of the ship does a wrong count at the end of the day.
Oh my God!
He thinks he's got them. Yeah. So it's a movie based on a true story, and it sort of takes place with them slowly going crazy, and the implication being that they are eaten by sharks in the end, or that they are sort of tormented by sharks. It's okay. Here's what I don't like about it is those people were just never heard from again. And so as soon as the boat leaves, it's based on a true story, but you're guessing about anything they talked about or what ultimately happened is a complete guess by the screenwriter.
Yeah.
It's okay. There's some other shark related. I mean, there's what do they call it? The Meg.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a movie about like a bitchy woman.
It's the megalodon, right? Basically, it's a megalodon shark.
Yeah, and I don't think, again, they should have spent as much time as Peter Benchley did and come up with a better title. The Meg. I have
I
not
mean,
seen
I
that.
am shocked and also appalled that your first mention was not Deep Blue Sea, because that
It's
is
terrible.
one of my favorite movies. I love it so much. It is horrendous, and I feel
It's
like all of the actors that were making it knew what they were getting into. They just knew that it was campy, and I love that movie.
I will say that like I do have favorites like that where it's so, movies are so can be so bad they're good. That's
Mm-hmm.
not one for me. It's just bad. It's hard for me to sit through. Well, I'll be completely fair. And you know what? Maybe fair's fair. So we could do a Jaws watch commentary,
Uh-huh.
and you could make me sit through Deep Blue Sea
Oh,
again. I probably haven't.
100%.
I will
Deep
say
Blue,
that I
sitting through Deep Blue Sea, though, would literally just be me quoting the movie the entire
oh, that'd be annoying.
I would be that annoying person just like slinging out the quotes before they're said or like while they're said.
I don't know. Maybe I think I don't remember when it came out. I'm sure I was a teenager, and I 15 minutes into the movie, I was like, "Oh, I made a mistake. This is gonna be a piece of shit."
Have you ever watched Shark Week? Obviously, Shark Week is a hugely popular thing now. I think it was more popular kind of like in the early 2000s, I want to say, but it's still going on. I mean, Shark
I
Week is a
have.
huge thing.
Yeah, it's on Discovery, and it
Mm-hmm.
also gave me my favorite euphemism for when a woman is having her visitor.
Is that what gave that, or did it start before? I guess it must have been from that.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's blood in the water, so Shark Week. That's
God.
no, I have watched that, and as a matter of fact, I can't say this for sure. It may have started earlier because Shark Week is a series of documentaries that they
Yeah.
air. This that I'm thinking of, this story, or the original version of this, the documentary, once again performed beautifully by Bill Curtis, was could have been part of early Shark Week. I'm not really sure, but yes, I've
Maybe.
certainly
Yeah.
indulged in that.
Yeah.
Not of late because I don't know where they air it, and I don't have television. But well, what I mean is that I don't have cable or any cable provider.
He's just a
So unless
hermit.
it's
He just doesn't have a television. He lives
I have a television. I don't
as a
have
hermit.
television. I do. I have a hermit-like existence. It's my little hermitage.
Amazing.
But I'm fascinated by sharks too, and I've indulged in that. But I think really, for me, it was I don't know. It was almost like I remember just wanting to watch that documentary and see if it was as good and enthralling as it was when I was a kid, and I couldn't find it, and so I was like, well, I could just read. Well, at the beginning, I was just like, well, I can satisfy that itch by just doing my research and telling the story, and probably from a slightly different perspective, especially because I don't know how similar they are because I don't remember all the turns. I
Yeah.
think that they're pretty different. But when we had the opportunity to start doing this, I thought like, well, I don't have to find it. We could just make our own. But I think the two biggest things for me, rather than dwelling for a very long time. I mean, we do get into every attack and we're,
Mm-hmm.
the timeline of it and exactly
Yeah, I
what
mean,
happened
a
to each
certain amount
person.
of respect has to be paid as well to people who lost their lives, for sure.
Absolutely, because several of them were children. But I think that if this doesn't it's almost like a butterfly effect, sort of in a vague way. This doesn't happen, the novel doesn't get written,
Mm-hmm.
the movie doesn't get made. And then, I mean, you could go a step further. Spielberg might not have had his blockbuster ever. He
Yeah.
might be a good director who just never really broke out.
I also
Who
think
knows?
without the film, I don't think there would be perhaps as much cultural interest in sharks. So as we touched on in the episode, I don't think there would be as much money and resources dedicated to learning more about them as well. I think
I
that
agree.
really all kind of spurred it on.
Well, and I think that it has there's a duality in the cultural impact, right? And there was at the time too. And they sort of portray this in the book, and they also portray it in the movie. People had a reaction to this at first which was to kill every shark they saw.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were just killing death machines, and they were out to get people.
Yeah.
And there's a certain I don't think that Spielberg or Peter Benchley have any responsibility for making people feel bad about sharks. It's fiction. And I don't think that the artist has any responsibility for the cultural impact of a story that they're trying to tell. I think
it's also, just to be noted, it's like a Western cultural thing, because in other cultures, I mean, people eat sharks. So,
but I think that it cuts both ways. It made people hostile to sharks for a certain period of time, but there are some kids who probably saw Jaws sitting in the theater who are now esteemed marine biologists.
Of course. Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think marine biology became more of a thing because of Jaws as well. It became more of a viable sort of career. It became a more popular thing to study, for sure, for sure.
And I know, I don't know how long we've been going, but I think we could talk more, but I think as a good episode closer, I knew you had never seen Jaws without telling me you'd never seen Jaws, because you complimented the chapter titles and didn't know that they were all Jaws. Every single one of them is a quote from the film Jaws.
And they were slightly more obscure, I think, quotes.
Well, I did do that
We're going to need a bigger boat, that kind of thing. But no, you're correct, yeah.
And I know you know how I think and I feel. And the phrase, we're going to need a bigger boat, would never appear, either audio or on. I would just have
Well, that's the name of this episode.
We're going to need a bigger boat?
Yeah.
Well, just in closing, I will say, no matter what they tell you, and no matter how unlikely it is, and getting eaten by a shark isn't, as far as odds goes, is akin to winning the lottery or getting struck by lightning, it's still never safe to go back in the water.
I'm Layla Lawrence.
And I'm Dan Lauer.
And this has been Possibly Not.